Okay, hello everyone. Good afternoon. Let's go ahead and get started with this market review. I'll go ahead and share my screen here. Okay, can you see my screen okay? Awesome. Okay, great. And there's Danny. All right, perfect. All right, so what I wanted to do this afternoon was just go through and do a top-down analysis. My analysis has been spot on. My timing has not been. So last couple of days, I was out of town yesterday. I was pretty busy this morning with some work stuff and getting the place ready for my dad to move in. And so I have not been focused, which is, of course, my own fault, but we live and we learn. So I always have to accept responsibility for my trades. Riot, I was in pretty much sold close to the highs of the day, stopping myself out, and then only to see it drop back in. And then Nvidia, same thing. I was already in a position, added a little bit to it, and then of course it ripped higher. Actually, after I cleared out my portfolio, I did end up going back into some 475 calls, which I'm actually up on right now, which is, nice, but I still wanted to go through this here and just see what the overall market's looking like. We have Tesla earnings and I believe Netflix, both of them reporting after hours. So that will definitely move the markets. We'll see what happens there. But as before, for those of you that do remember when I had my room at Sepia Group, I'm pretty much going to start off with the same thing. So, looking at some of these market internals and then going through the yields and so on and just seeing where we are. Can I switch this off? Sorry, Danny, what are you asking me to switch off?
I see. Hi guys.
Yep. Hi.
I see my email address over the whole screen.
Huh.
And I don't know if it's just a configuration against, I don't know, screenshotting or whatever. But it's just simply looks strange.
You know what? I noticed that on mine as well in the background. Nick, you notice yours as well? So it's your email address that you see, not mine.
Yes, it's mine. If you are asking me, yes.
Interesting. Okay. Well, it doesn't show on my end. So I'm guessing it just shows your own email address. I think that's from Zoom, but I'm not sure exactly how to turn it off.
Right.
Hmm.
Okay, just continue. Sorry.
Okay. Yeah. No, I'm not sure why that is. I'll look into it and see. That's definitely the first time somebody's told me that that's happened. But okay, we'll try and get figured out for the next one. All right, so let's go ahead and get started with this top-down analysis. So, I like to look at the VIX, what's the VIX been doing? So if we look at the VIX on the daily, obviously we have been in a market uptrend, very bullish price action. We can see that VIX is now back down to a low today of 1312. You'll see a lot of people out there saying, oh my God, the VIX is so low. The VIX is, under 14. Those are people that have not been around the markets for very long. I remember VIX being under 10. In fact, I think when VIX used to get down to around 8 or 9, one of the trades that we used to put on was we would buy in the money VXX calls. And then when VIX would spike to, 12, 14, we would take that off. So it was just a trade where when VIX was making new lows, we'd look to buy, 60 to 90 days out, buy enough time, because eventually there will be some sort of, shakeout in the market. It was a fairly reliable trade. Not something that I'd be looking to put on too often right now, just because, you know, we'd have to wait for it to make a low. So if we did take out, you know, this previous low here, I'd look to potentially buy some, you know, either VXX, UVXI, UVXY, whatever the case might be, and just look for a spike like we saw here. So you can see that, you know, whenever we make that low, we get a spike. We make a low, we get a spike. We make a low, we get a spike. So are we due for one? Yeah, maybe. Sometimes it takes a little bit of time between spikes. Sometimes it takes a little bit longer. So that's the reason why we would buy, you know, 60 to 90 days out as opposed to our regular 30 to 45 days if we were trading, say, a daily squeeze. The move, you know, bonds, same idea. The dollar, actually, the dollar has been very interesting lately. We've come back to this 100 level, you know, psychological support. It has held up so far. We did dip below it and then pop back up, but you know, there's not a lot of love for the dollar right now, right? And this is also a good thing for the markets, right? If the dollar continues to decline, then we should see the markets continue to rally. Put call, you know, not really much going on there. We can see that we did have a spike, but now that the market's rallying, put call's fairly low. Yields, actually, I was pretty surprised at the move that we had in yields. We did pop back above 5, and then we sold off pretty sharply. We do have a squeeze on the daily for yields. That's the 2-year, the 10-year, you know, looks to cross over. The 30-year pretty much is already crossed over. We do have an inverted yield curve, so the lower or the shorter time frame expiries are higher than the longer time frame. So an inverted yield curve is usually an indication that, you know, interest rates are going up, and that's how we end up with an inverted yield curve. Gold's actually looking pretty good on the daily. Kind of wish I saw this yesterday because that was a pretty decent setup, or even, you know, anytime in the last week. I think somebody did mention gold a couple of days ago. So there is some potential there. If we do come back to this cluster of EMAs, I would be happy to look at a trade there. The weekly also has a squeeze, and we've also got a squeeze on the monthly. My goodness. Okay, so if we were to have, you know, this monthly squeeze, so the red dot squeeze has actually already fired. We still have this black dot squeeze. If this was to fire, you know, so where would some of our likely targets be? So I like to draw a fib retracement. First target would be our highs, so that makes sense there. Then we're looking at 22 and then 23.63. Crude oil. Let's clear these off. Remove drawings. All right, so crude oil on the daily, not looking the greatest, considering we keep bouncing off of this 200 EMA, or sorry, that's the 200 SMA. But we did have that bullish crossover. Okay, so that squeeze did fire to the upside, stopped short right there. If we do continue to consolidate in this area here, you know, maybe come back to that 21 before making another move higher, could be very bullish for oil. We haven't had EMA stacked positive on crude for some time. The last time it happened was, you know, April of last year. And then, of course, we had that bear market. We know that oil, when it moves, it can really move quickly, especially with all the geopolitical stuff that we've got going on. The TSX, nobody really cares about the TSX because everyone's in the US, but you know, for me here in Toronto, it does matter. That does look good. So happy to see that there. Papa Dow, that squeeze finally fired to the long side. The squeeze here has yet to fire, but we're already getting +2 ATR, and the monthly also has a squeeze. So there is some huge potential here if this has the energy to continue. So, you know, if this daily squeeze continues higher, you know, that's already fired off. We can look at the weekly squeeze. The red dot already fired. Now, if the black dot's going to fire, how's that going to take us? And then, of course, we've got the monthly squeeze. So what we're looking at right now is a chain reaction, right? These are like a fuse. So this continues, gives it enough energy so that this can fire, and then gives it enough energy that that can fire. And so again, if we're looking at targets, just a quick fib. Oh, that's not it. Let's try that again. Let me just do a quick fib retracement here. And so, of course, the recent highs, 39 and then 42. Right, so very possible. IWM has actually been lagging in terms of the overall move higher. It is starting to catch up. We had an absolutely beautiful squeeze here back on July the 10th. We do have that weekly squeeze. These EMAs are going to be stacked positive again soon in the next few weeks. And then we've also got the monthly squeeze. So again, a lot of potential. We want to be careful, having a bearish bias. When we look at the economy and we look at everything that's happening, yes, we're heading into a recession. They continue to raise rates, all that great stuff. Remember that the market is a leading indicator. So, if we had a bear market last year, it's forecasting that, things are going to get worse, but the market's already projecting that, at least for things being priced in, for now, at this moment in time, it's looking like it's going to be smooth sailing going ahead. Of course, with earnings coming out, that could change everything. All right. All we do is pay attention to the signs, and we base our trades off of what has a higher probability outcome. And then we've got the SPY. Well, the squeeze fired way back here, took us up. We had another squeeze here. You had to kind of be quick and, a little bit generous with that one if you're looking to get into it. But again, we're +3 ATR. The weekly fired. My goodness, what a move. And then we've still got the monthly, which is yet to fire. Right. So we have a lot of room to the upside. Right. 480, 515, 561 would be our projections. Now, that being said, remember, we're looking at a monthly chart. Our retracement back to the 21 EMA takes us back to 412. Okay, got somebody else here. So yes, let's look at the Qs now. The Qs, same thing. The Qs have just been on an absolute tear. So we had another squeeze there, fired long. The weekly, right? This weekly squeeze fired way back here. Right? Well above +3 ATR now. And then of course we've got that monthly, which is just back into a squeeze here. So anything can happen. If we're looking at projections for the Qs, 408, 450, 504. Imagine that. And then, of course, we've got Bitcoin, which we've been, or at least I've been following fairly closely. Bitcoin looks like it does not want to give up this range, right? And just see that we've been chopping around within this range. We did make a lower low here, but we still haven't taken out this low. Momentum, however, has started to shift, right? Orange dot squeeze with red momentum, the potential 821 crossover. If this fires to the downside, we're looking at 28,500. And we know that Bitcoin loves to have these massive knife downs and then, it quickly gets bought back up. So we'll see what happens. Riot and Mara have been very good to us. You guys know about the little fiasco I had with Riot. I sold like here, and then it did this, and I left like, at its peak, it was about 75K US on the table. So, you win some, you lose some. I would much rather be disciplined in buying at the 21 and selling at the +2 ATR over and over and over again. But, if I could have held on to that, that would have been fantastic. I have been back testing that 8 EMA to see at what point, so basically what I found, I'll share my findings with you. And if anybody else has been looking at it, maybe you can share your findings as well. I have found that once we get above +2 ATR and break above that +3, that's when we get these moves that start to kind of ride between that +2, +3 ATR, and then we could use the 8 EMA as a potential stop, right? A trailing stop. So close below that 8. It has happened with a few of these names, right? You can see with NVIDIA. Once it
I
starts
did not
riding that
do.
trade.
I did not finalize the back test yet.
Okay, no problem.
But what it currently shows
Mhm.
is that it's better to stop on to have targets on 2 ATR and 3 ATR
Okay,
than have wait until it closes under EMA 8. Yeah.
really? Okay, so it's more
At
reliable.
least at least that's my current finding. I do not have so many trades yet. It's
Okay,
more about 10, 15 or something like that. So it's not statistically enough,
okay,
but it shows this.
good to know. Good to know. So doing what we're doing is the higher probability, I guess.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, there are times where, what was it? IONQ was one where it just, kept ripping. ENVX, right? Like sold way back here at like 15. So some of these other ones, but if that's what you're seeing so far, what I'll probably do is, at least take half of my position off and then maybe, put my mental stop here and see. Because when it does hold that 8 EMA, it does continue a little bit higher. The question is, at what point do we say, okay, sell or, trail our stop? So we'll do some more testing. Anything that we can do to improve our results, of course, is beneficial, but that's something that we'll definitely have to keep an eye out for. So in terms of the indexes still look incredibly bullish. Let's take a look at some of the big names. So, NVIDIA has just been an absolute beast. Like you would have thought that, after this move from 300 gapping up to 365, just had no quit, series of higher highs and higher lows. We are due for some sort of corrective activity. Hasn't quite happened yet. We do have earnings coming up here in August. So I think it's really going to depend on what happens with some of these other big names when they report and what they're going to do to the overall market. But on the daily, you can see we're a bit extended, the weekly extended, and the monthly extended. But just because it's extended doesn't mean that it has to come back to reality, right? Things can continue much further than we think. What's the old saying? The market can remain irrational much longer than you can remain solvent. So have to be very careful with any sort of reversion to the mean trades that we're looking to take, because this could run another 20, 30 bucks and then pull back, and then run another 20, 30 and pull back. So we'll see what happens. This is why we have to manage our trades, manage our risk. That's where all of that other stuff comes in. So NVIDIA, Tesla's reporting after the bell tonight. Let me, let's remove those drawings there. So if we're looking at Tesla on the daily, we're already +3. We did make that high, but we're coming back in. This squeeze, you didn't even get a chance to get in on, right? So there are some people who will buy between the 8 and the 21. For me, I don't like to do that. I would much rather wait and stock it right at the 21 here. Sure, I missed some trades, but I like those higher probability trades, especially if I'm going to put a little bit of size into it. So Tesla on the daily, on the weekly, also looks extended. On the monthly, just EMAs are just stacked positive again. So we do have a lot of potential here with earnings for that squeeze to fire to the upside. So right now we've got a slingshot squeeze, right? So that's where we have yellow momentum with the squeeze. EMAs are stacked positive. Are we going to get a chance to buy it back around 230? I don't know. All depends on earnings. Tesla could be at 200 tomorrow morning, could be at 400 tomorrow morning. And I don't think anybody would really be surprised just on, the way Tesla likes to move. And I imagine there's quite a bit of People who are short Tesla institutions, you know, the ones who want to try and burn Elon, but we know how that's worked out for them in the past. So Tesla, you know, looking pretty good, looking pretty solid there. Meta buddy does have some friends here, it looks like. Let's remove these drawings. So again, same thing, right? Just smooth, steady. Like we haven't come back to the 21 here on the daily since last earnings, which is incredible, right? We're going on what, April to May to June to July, 3 months since we've actually touched that 21. They do have earnings coming up next week, so you know, we'll see what happens there. But on the daily, looks good. Weekly, you know, extended, monthly, you know, between +2 and +3 ATR. You know, if you did take this based on the strat setup, you did very well. But I'm not sure what time frame continuity would have been back here. Right? Looking at it, actually would have been all red. So I don't know if anybody taking the strat or trading the strat would have taken that trade back there, but who knows? Microsoft all-time highs. You know, with that news yesterday, I read something that based on the increase in market cap yesterday alone, Microsoft would need to sell subscriptions to half of the world's population for that move to be justified. So it just shows you how crazy things are right now. Doesn't mean anything. This could absolutely continue. So Microsoft reporting next week. You know, we did have a nice squeeze back here. If you did take that trade, you did very well. And if you didn't, don't worry about it. We will always find more trades, right? So you can see here when these EMAs start to cross over, looks very good. And talk about a monthly squeeze. Yikes. Sheesh. How did I miss that one? All right, well, there you go. Just shows you how that squeeze works out, right? I must have looked at this because I drew a fib on it. Oh, well. So there you have it, right? If you took this trade based on the monthly, you would have needed to buy a lot of time. So that's something that we first of all need to consider. Is it within your budget to be able to buy, you know, 8 months of time? If you did very well. Another option is, you know, you could have done a debit spread. You could have sold puts on it, you know, put credit spread. You could have done a butterfly on it, which would have been, you know, a very low cost way to have gotten exposure to that name. Or if you just took regular calls, you know, you're up $100 from where you got in, and it's still got room to go. Like, I mean, we're just breaking out here. So target's 386, 433 on that monthly. Apple, you know, largest company in the world, made an all-time high today. We haven't had a squeeze on it since back here. We did come to the 21, but we didn't get a squeeze on the weekly. You know, does look like it's, you know, a little bit extended, but we continue higher. And we just had this squeeze fire long again back here. Wow. So 145 to 195. You took that monthly squeeze. But this is the setup that we're looking for, right? Over and over again. Buy at the 21, stack DMAs. Here we've got momentum was yellow, so that's a slingshot squeeze. And you can see that move. Actually, if I draw a fib on this one. So we're just, look at that. You can't make that stuff up. Who says fibs don't work? 198.93 was the 1272 extension. And we hit 198.23 today. That's incredible. Amazon, same thing, right? Amazon does have a daily squeeze. Could have gotten back into it here. Earnings next week, but still looks good. So if you did take that squeeze, hit your profit target, right? So no reason to try and overstay your welcome with these, because you can see how there are times where we'll come to that +2 and then it'll pull back in, and then it might go higher. We don't know. So weekly does not look like we don't have EMAs that are stacked positive, but we'll be there. right? It will take a few weeks, but looks like it's headed in that direction. The monthly, same thing. So we actually do have a monthly squeeze now. You can see what happened when this monthly squeeze fired to the downside as well, right? So here we had a squeeze. Great example. Here we had a squeeze at the 21, right? So you could have bought anywhere here. This would have been your best point to buy. So you're looking at what? That was $88. If you took it off at +3, that was about 113. Sorry, +2 was about 113. If you traded this breakout, it was also a valid setup. Kept going. Here, when the EMAs crossed over, right, you can see that momentum was already telling us the story there. That 8 crossed below, and you can see how it just got absolutely wrecked. And then here we are again with another monthly squeeze. So buy point would be around 122. You know, a couple of bad days in the market could get us back down to that level, no problem. But definitely looking like things are heading in the right direction. Then we've got Google. Google actually right at the buy point today. Earnings coming up next week. So I don't trade earnings. If you guys want to trade earnings, you can. It's entirely up to you. For me, I've just never really had luck trading earnings. There is a setup for those of you that took my course, you know what I'm talking about. It's I call it leaving the party before the cops show up, right? And so this is where if you have a valid setup, you know, like here, for example, you could have gotten in. We would have already hit our target, so no reason to stay. But essentially, if you find a valid setup heading into earnings, you can take a position, and then you would benefit from implied volatility increasing. You know, just because something's reporting earnings doesn't mean you should go long or short. You do need to have a valid setup. And then the idea is we don't hold through earnings, right? So if they're reporting after hours today and we're already up on the trade, implied volatility would be the highest right before the event. So we would look to exit our trade before, because we know what happens after they report earnings. We end up with an IV crush. And for those of you that have never experienced one, it's essentially where implied volatility will collapse. And so you might be correct in terms of direction and distance and time, but because IV collapses after earnings get released, if it's within that expected move that's priced in by the market makers, those calls or puts are going to, you know, lose a significant portion of their value. So if you are trading earnings, the best thing, at least in my opinion, to do is to wait for that report. Once that comes out and it starts heading in one direction or the other, then you can look for a setup at that time. But I won't, like, very rarely. I think CLF is probably the only one that I've held through in the last few years, and that worked out pretty well. So up to you what you're going to do, but I personally don't like it. Netflix also reporting today. I did read something about them canceling their lowest ad-free package. I don't know if it's going to be a good thing or a bad thing. I imagine with the crackdown on password sharing and some of their new packages that they would have you know, had some good numbers. I just don't know if after a move like this, there's a lot of room left for it to run, but we don't know, right? Look at NVIDIA. So daily looks great. That squeeze has already fired. So hit the +3 ATR. Should have taken, you know, so if I was in that trade, I would have already taken my profits. If you are still in that trade, trade whatever you decided for your plan. Okay. Weekly squeeze did fire. We're at target here again. Monthly squeeze. Oh, and last time we had a monthly squeeze was back here. So no monthly squeeze here, but momentum has moved. So we could potentially, you know, if earnings are good, see a continued rally, but there's no squeeze on that right now. And if we look at SMH, right, semiconductors had a squeeze, fired long. And then let's look at some of these. So XLE, I'll clear all of these off. Well, actually, we were in that range. So XLE on the daily, so this is the energy ETF. You can see that the EMAs are almost stacked positive again. I like this, right? This is a good sign. We did have a squeeze that fired. For those of you that take the early entry, right? So with an 821 crossover and squeeze, some people will take that trade. It is higher risk, but you can get some pretty explosive moves out of it, right? So again, manage your trade, know what you're trading. You know, for me, the absolute best setup is stacked positive, nice clean setup, and then I don't have to think about it too much. I know exactly what the setup looks like and where my stop is, where my profit target is, and then just trade it that way. It's very easy to rinse and repeat that. But you can see that we did come up, came through that 200, came back down, held that 21, and we will be stacked positive again soon. This looks very good with the weekly squeeze, right? Some potential there. We haven't crossed yet in terms of the 821, but we do have a very aggressive squeeze there. And then the monthly, look at that. Monthly squeeze, momentum is still above zero, although it's declining. You know, perfect buy point would have been back here around 76. So if you are looking to trade that, gets back to around 76, you know, that would be the entry point. You know, considering it is a monthly and considering how the weekly and the daily look, if I was looking at this, you know, it's very possible that this doesn't come back to 76. So anywhere between the 8 and the 21 is acceptable. I just prefer to wait and not get into the habit of chasing because, you know, it has already moved. But when we look at the lower time frames, like this is just getting started here, especially if we're just breaking out of this range. So up to you, trade your plan. But that's sort of my input on that. XME. XME is one that does look like it's got a lot of potential. So you can see that the EMAs are almost stacked positive again. The weekly, same thing. We do have that squeeze. The last week would have been perfect to get in. And then here we are. It doesn't get any prettier than that. So a lot of room to the upside. If this thing fires, we're looking at, you know, $6 move right there. Or sorry, not a $6 move, a $10 move to get back up to here. So huge potential, monthly squeeze, right? Monthly squeezes have a huge amount of power behind them. So names within XME is something that we definitely want to be looking at. XLV, same idea. All right, so we have been in this huge consolidation pattern. We did break out of it, only to have a shooter. That squeeze did fire off. And that was a thing of beauty. Look at that. Pushed right off of that EMA cluster. Not a big move. No, it's $1, but still making some progress. That is beautiful. And then we have a squeeze there as well. If I was looking at a sector right now, it would be XLV. Okay. You have that huge move, right? These will be stacked positive within the next few days. The weekly and the monthly, wow. So I'd definitely be looking for some names in XLV. XLP, same idea, right? These EMAs are going to be stacked positive again. We do have a squeeze. The weekly EMAs will be stacked positive, but no squeeze here. We have a squeeze here, an orange dot squeeze that we just touched earlier this week. So, I mean, it's not quite chasing, but, you know, if you could get a little bit lower, that would be fantastic. But keep in mind that this is a monthly setup. So, you know, our target's all the way up here, 81, 82 or higher. And if you just draw a quick fib retracement on there, you know, we're looking at 85, 90 as our targets. So XLP names also look very good. So we've got XLV, XLP, somebody want to jot those down, or actually what I'll do is, already got them on my list. Let's add that to green. XLB. XLB, same thing. That squeeze did fire. Let's clear this off. So perfect setup there, right? Looking to buy at the 21. EMAs are stacked positive. Hit our target. So not a bad move. That's a $3 move off of the ETF. That was an absolutely beautiful setup a couple of weeks ago. And then the monthly, same thing, right? Again, if we could get a little bit lower, that would be great. This has moved quite a bit now. You know, we're not even close to the 8 EMA. So if we do get some sort of corrective activity back into this $79, $80 range, that's a buy for me all day. So XLB, definitely like the looks of that. XLF, I know some of us were in Morgan Stanley, which has been doing very well. So here you have it. EMAs are now stacked positive. That squeeze did fire. So nothing to do on the daily, but the weekly, beautiful, right? Those will be stacked positive again soon. And then the monthly. So not too late, right? It is a little above there, but you know, still an absolutely fantastic setup. XLI. Let's get this off. So XLI Industrials already made that move, right? This squeeze from way back in June, still powering along. Beautiful setup back here. And then look at that. So you did have a couple of opportunities to buy in here. 97, we're now at 109, and that's off the ETF, right? So just think about what kind of powerful move you would have had on some of the individual tickers. So we did just break out above that high, 114, 123 we're looking at to the upside. So then we've got XLC. XLC did have a squeeze back here. We did hit our target. The weekly, wow, just 2 up after 2 up after 2 up. That would have been a 2 down. So you did get a 2-2 reversal. So, you know, if you are trading the strat, you did have the opportunity to get in here, right? This was also a 2-1-2. But, you know, I couldn't be entering in here when we're already +2 ATR. It's just not how I trade. And then here, same thing. No squeeze, but what an insane move. So I'll actually take that off of the list. XLU. XLU looks like it's ready to continue its descent, simply because nobody wants utilities when the market is running, right? We know that utilities are generally a safe haven, but you know, EMAs are stacked negative here. So, you know, if we were to push off of this downwards, you know, we'd break out of this consolidation. Sam, I saw your question. Yeah, you can trade the ETF. What I'm going to do actually, once I go through the entire list here, is I'll actually look at the names within that sector. So what I like to do with my top-down analysis is I look at the index, and then I'll go and I'll look at the ETF. And if the ETF has a squeeze or a really good setup, then I'll go and I'll look at the individual names. So that way we're looking at the best of the best of the best. And that's where we get some of these explosive moves. Right? Because as institutions rotate out of one sector into another, we can definitely see that you know, prices will get adjusted as, you know, volume starts coming in or out of those names. So that is XLU on the daily, XLU on the weekly, XLU on the monthly. So this thing's just ready to die. There's no positive news here for utilities, which makes sense, right? So XLU is okay if you're looking for a short setup. We'd have to look for some names there. Real estate, well, say what you want about rising interest rates. Real estate has looked pretty good since March, right? So EMAs are finally stacked positive again. No squeeze. That squeeze did fire off back here. And actually looking at that, that would have been okay to take. You know, if some of these higher time frame EMAs are not stacked positive, but you know, the 8's above the 21, above the 34, and we're above all of them in terms of price, you could get away with it, but you are kind of breaking your rules, right? So just keep that in mind. The weekly, you know, is finally starting to turn. So the EMAs are not stacked negative anymore. That 821 looks fantastic. Did cross over to the upside there. We do have a squeeze. So, you know, where would we buy? I'd look to buy off of here if I was going to take that setup. And then, of course, we've got the monthly, which doesn't look too good, but it's, you know, it's not the worst. That 8 is starting to turn. That squeeze did fire short. Did hit its target here, but, you know, once it fired here, I guess there was just nothing left. So XLRE, not one that I'd be looking at. XLK, I think we all know and love. 170 to 179. So that daily looked fantastic. This weekly from way back here when we had that the crossover of the clusters. Fantastic move there. And then, geez, this monthly squeeze still hasn't even fired. So targets 195, 218. I'll definitely add that back. So not really, actually, you know what? There's no real actionable signal there. So I'll remove that. You know, already made its move. Huge move to the upside. You know, it could continue to run. If you're a breakout trader, you know, this just broke out here. Volume looks okay. You know, we're only at Wednesday. I'm not sure we're going to see some huge inflow of volume, but it all depends on what happens with earnings on some of these names. So I will keep that off of the green list for now. And then we've got consumer discretionary, right? So we had a squeeze back here. That squeeze fired long already. EMAs are stacked positive, but we're nowhere close to the buy zone. So last week would have been okay at 154, and here we are at 177. So I will add that. So now, if we go to our green list, well, I guess these are some names that we had already looked at. So XME, right? So let's go to the XME chart or the XME list. And just go through the list quickly here. So CMC, that move already happened, right? But you can see, right? That's the monthly chart. Nothing here on the daily. Weekly has already moved. And then that monthly is already getting to its target. So nothing to do there. MP, no bueno. ATI, no squeeze. RS, no squeeze. BTU, no squeeze. This has a squeeze. EMAs are starting to turn. They do have earnings coming up though. So not something that I would take right now, but you can definitely keep that on the list. X is going to give it to you, right? Those of you that remember DMX. But here you go. They are reporting earnings. This looks fantastic. This is a very strong stock, US Steel. EMA is almost stacked positive there. Starting to look a little better here. I'd love to see momentum shift. But this is definitely something that I'd want to keep on my watch list. CEIX, that's decent. That is not bad at all. Earnings in August. So, you know, we do get a pullback to here. Great. Yesterday at the high or today at the low would have been perfect time to get in. You know, we're looking for our targets up there. So that's not bad. On the daily, on the weekly, beautiful, right? That was fantastic. She got in there, and then the monthly has already moved. So we keep that on our list. AMR looks good to me, right? That's not bad there. Again, earnings coming up for a lot of these names. This looks pretty good. And we're finally into a squeeze here. But, you know, the 21 is back at 132. So we would need these squeezes here to fire short to get us back to the buy zone on the monthly, right? So great example. If this squeeze fires short instead of long, right now it's, you know, EMAs are stacked positive, but they are pretty closely clustered. So let's say this does turn hypothetically, and this 8 crosses the 21. That's no longer a clean setup. We're then looking for a move to the downside. So if that happens, and this fires short, our target would be that -2 ATR, which if I just draw this line here, when we go to the monthly chart, takes us back to around the 21. So sometimes for us to get back to where we need to be for a buy, the shorter timeframes need to fire in the opposite direction of the overall trend. Now, if you get something where you've got a whole bunch of squeezes lined up and they all start to fire, that's where you get a move like Riot and Mara and, you know, NVIDIA, etc. Right? So it does look good. We can add that to the list. Arch. This is no bueno. I wouldn't even look at that. Yeah, nothing to see there. No, not for me. FCX. Love this company. Did have a buy on it here, but they do have earnings. So I'd wait until they report. If we do get a pullback down to around here, I would consider going long on it. Definitely. NEM starting to look okay. Again, earnings. So you got to ask yourself, would you rather trade something that looks like this? Right? Stacked DMAs right at the buy zone, or would you rather try and trade something like this? For me, this is what I'm looking for. Same setup over and over again. CLF, this is probably the only company that I would ever hold through earnings. I love this company. The CEO is, you know, maybe next Elon Musk, my favorite CEO. Really knows the business. He's savage when it comes to dealing with analysts. You know, will publicly shame them. It's great for entertainment, and you know, a lot of those analysts are very cocky. So it's nice to see them brought back to reality. But right now, we do have a squeeze. These EMAs will be stacked positive again soon. The weekly is starting to shape up a little bit. Yeah, take care, Sam. Nice to have you. Talk to you soon. Doesn't have anything setting up here just yet, but with earnings, we could definitely see. This can absolutely run. I remember I caught one of these moves back here after earnings, and it just absolutely took off. Made some good money. So that's basically, you know, what we're doing when we're going through our top-down analysis. Right, so CLF, I'll add that. No squeeze there, no squeeze there. We do have a squeeze here, but we're way above the buy zone. So hopefully you guys can see what I'm looking for, right? I'm looking for where there's strength and where we can get a good trade setup, right? So EMAs are not stacked positive here anymore, nothing to do. That looks decent. That looks decent. If we can get back around 115, that would be a very nice setup. But again, that's a monthly setup. So we'd be looking to buy, you know, 8 months out, 9 months out, maybe longer. AA, Alcoa, great company, just price doesn't seem to be cooperating with it right now. So the daily does not look good. The weekly does not look good, but we've got a squeeze. The monthly squeeze is fired short. You know, if you want to maybe try and be a value type investor, but for me, no bueno, right? So that did fire short back at 46. So, you know, our target is down around 19 or 20. Yikes. Right. Hecla Mining, same idea. EMA stack positive here again. Stack positive here, but not really at the buy zone. We were back here. That looks fantastic. This would be more of a, buy the stock and, look at the fundamentals of the company. $6. You could buy options on it if you wanted, but there you go. So that's basically how I go through my top-down analysis. What I do want to do is go back and see what happened with Tesla. Tesla was supposed to report earnings, right? So does anybody know if they have reported already? You can see we're down 1%. So not sure what's happening there. NVIDIA did close. That's not bad. So I did not close out my position. So hopefully we get a nice flush tomorrow. Now let's see what happens here. Riots. So aftermarket, right? Futures. NASDAQ seems to be rallying a little bit here off of that low. But it's really all going to boil down to Tesla and Netflix. So Tesla is actually positive again. So we'll wait and see, right? Can't really do anything right now. But Tesla post-market, haven't broken the 300 level yet. We'll see what happens when the earnings report gets digested. And so here you can see it coming right back down. So for those of you that do try and trade earnings, if you're trading the stock and you're holding through earnings, it can be risky. You do have a lot more money at risk, but a 10% drop with the stock versus 40% drop with your options contracts, depending on how many you have, could be a meaningful difference. So another alternative that you can do is, if you are looking to try and play implied volatility, there are some more advanced options strategies, which I don't recommend, because when they go wrong, they go really wrong. And it's not something that you're going to easily be able to get out of, especially if you're trapped overnight, right? We could wake up tomorrow morning and see Tesla at 350. We could wake up tomorrow morning and see Tesla at 250. All of this action right now is pretty meaningless, right? 15 minutes from now, we could be up 5%, down 5%. All it's doing right now is just, seeing what happens. Netflix, not looking good, right? So people who swung those, we're going to see all kinds of crazy things tomorrow on FinTwit. People who are saying, yeah, we knew that Netflix was going to miss. Like, I don't know how, sure, you had a shooter or you had a spinning top, but there wasn't really anything here telling you that, Netflix was going to miss earnings, right? Like, what are you going to say? You took a short at, maybe. I think trading earnings is more of a gamble than anything else, but we'll see what happens. So Tesla versus Netflix, what's going to pull the market more? Tesla does have the higher market cap, if I'm not mistaken. Market cap of $1 billion. Netflix is probably half of that. No, not even. 212. Wow. So Tesla will be the one to move the market, but it all depends on what everybody thinks and feels tomorrow. Right now, this doesn't mean a whole lot. We could wake up. I've seen NVIDIA. So actually, I'll tell you guys a true story before we hang up for today. I traded NVIDIA earnings a few years ago, and I had calls on it. They smashed their numbers. This was a few years ago. It was like all-time record profit. After hours was up like $50. Okay. And then in the morning, it completely sold off. And I sold right at the lows, only for it to turn around and rip higher. So, it's one thing to be right. It's one thing to be right and lose money. So be very careful. You'll notice that the way I trade is, when I am focused and, kind of in the zone, I'm looking at the same setups over and over again, right? If we look at my charts, you can see that they all pretty much look the same. So actually, if you're in BA, this is pretty much a dead trade now. That 821's crossing over, momentum has shifted, but they've got earnings. So the weekly still looks okay. Yeah. If I could get it back down around here, 206, I would take it, because this weekly obviously means a lot more than the daily. And this looks fantastic. Don't like the shooter, it's still inside, but that squeeze did fire long. Okay, so we do have some potential there. So that's it for me. Does anybody have any questions? If you do, feel free to type them into the Discord and I'll answer them in just a few minutes. But other than that, hopefully you did find this beneficial. So just a quick recap, markets still look good overall. The trend is undoubtedly up. The sectors that we want to be looking at, XME, XLV, XLF, XLI, XLU, XLY. Had a few names here from before, and of course, XLP, XLB. So lots of potential. Just because tech is ripping doesn't mean that we should ignore the other sectors. In fact, it's some of those overlooked sectors that, you know, the institutions might be starting to build positions in, and you would be able to ride this trend for, you know, some time. So like those names, you saw the top-down analysis, how I did it. So we're looking at the sector, we're looking at the index, we're looking at the sector, right? So the ETFs, and then we're looking for the strong names with setups within those sectors. So that's it for me. Take care, everyone. Have a great night, and I will see you all tomorrow. Bye for now.